made better, but I believe what's happening here is innovative, and I believe what's happening here is good, and I believe what's happening here connects people with Judaism, and that's always what I've wanted to do. I've been at Shomrei Torah for the past 3 years. I've gotten to know the other side of the Valley Circle Boulevard Jews, and I think it's incredible. I think it's incredible that while we do things occasionally differently, that we meet together as a community. That's so amazingly important. I tell my classmates about that spot right there, the playground where we allow kids to be noisy and messy and play with blocks and toys at shul. That doesn't happen elsewhere. I believe in it. I've had such incredible support, and so many people have come up to me and say they believe in me, and that's why I want to be here. Did that answer your question?
Other questions?
You've mentioned you've been in Israel a couple of times. I don't know if you've been there more. Did you pick up any abilities in conversational Hebrew?
So the tricky part about living in Jerusalem is that if they hear an American accent, they are immediately going to divert to Amerikain, English. I noticed that when I go back, I pick up more modern Hebrew. So yeah, a little bit. And it was interesting being there with my little boy. I picked up a lot of playground Hebrew. You know, when you go to seminary, you're learning biblical Hebrew and you're learning Aramaic. They don't teach you how to say kedor, like a ball, right? So just being there, interacting with my neighbors, interacting with kids on the playground. Yes, and then I was just back there in December, and not being in Jerusalem. I think when you have to go out and actually use your Hebrew, yeah, you get more. I've done Ulpan a couple of times. There was a program I did in Middlebury, Vermont, where I had to sign a waiver that I would only speak Hebrew for 7 weeks. And I was dining in the dining hall, speaking Hebrew. When I got back to my dorm room, I was speaking in Hebrew. So if you apply yourself, you really get it. And I will say that if you don't use it actively, you can lose it pretty quickly. But just being back there, you pick it up more. Thanks, Jared. Can everybody hear me with this mic? Okay, good.
We haven't had the pleasure of getting to know you this year, so we're just listening to your resume. And it sounds like you have a great deal of experience with youth and youth programming and youth education and so forth. I'd be interested to know your vision for a little older than youth. What innovations, programs, ideas, where would you like to take us?
Thank you. So we have wonderful programming here for people who aren't just youth. We have a Talmud study class, which is wonderful. I'd also like to sit down with several groups and have a conversation about what they might like to learn. And maybe that's Talmud, maybe that's Bible, maybe that's, it could be anything. It could be Israeli dancing, whatever. Something that we would all like to do together. I also think it would be really cool if we could pioneer some sort of Shabbat meal program. Friday nights to get people who are looking for community and maybe alternate and pivot homes. I think that would be wonderful. I think the important thing is just having a conversation. I said it yesterday. I just want to make sure that before we pilot a program or I do anything, that I know what the people actually want to do.
Next question, Adrian.
Yesterday you said something really interesting. You said that you like to speak from and to the Bible, that most of your commentaries are based upon the Bible. And I found that fascinating. Could you just elaborate a bit more about that, why, and what you draw from that?
I think so many incredible stories can be found within the pages of the Tanakh that I know a lot of my classmates in seminary just never had access to growing up. Wonderful, wonderful stories about courage and, I have some female colleagues who say that they don't hear enough about the feminist protagonists in the Torah. We don't talk about that enough. My son's name is Josiah. It's no mistake that his name is Josiah. I named him after the last righteous king of Israel, who basically, while they were doing spring cleaning on the temple, somebody found the Torah, or probably biblical scholars think Deuteronomy, and they asked him what to do. What do we do with this? And he went and found a prophetess named Huldah, and she told him exactly what to do and how it was all going to play out. I was familiar with that story, but a lot of my colleagues in seminary weren't. And I think like I said, there's so many powerful characters and stories that can be used to inspire, and I think it would be great just to have access to that. There's not just stories of martyrdom, but stories of heroism, stories deeply connected to God, and then there are stories that are intricately connected to the Parsha that we might not always hear about in the Haftorah. So I would just like to have more access for people to have to that. And it can be, every week, it could be every month. What I'd really like to do is get an online teaching going maybe once a week, maybe once a month, if people are interested, called Haftorah with Hudson. I think a lot of people there's so many, I know on my Facebook feed and different elements of social media, there's a lot of conversations happening about Parsha HaShavua, but nobody ever really talks about the Haftorah. And, I was reading yesterday in Ezekiel and how it was making the connection to what we read. I think that's great stuff. I want people to have access to that stuff. This stuff belongs to us. Like that saying, Zeh Shalanu, this is ours. I want people to be able to have it be theirs. So I would like to do that. Thank you.
So you mentioned some of the program ideas that you had. On a kind of wider angle level, I'm just curious, over the last 5 years plus, you've seen a lot of synagogues and a lot of different concepts for prayer and for minyan and for just different ways that Jews come together to pray, on whether it's academically or in synagogues. What do you think Aliyah does better than any of those places, and what have you seen in other places that you think we could do better here?
So the first question is really easy to answer. I think Aliyah is and has always been willing to have a conversation about how are we being innovative and how are we reaching people that may be more difficult to reach. And so I think just by nature of the fact that we have amazing chazanim that include music in our Shabbat services, that's beautiful and amazing. That Friday night service the other night when we did Debbie Friedman and those kids got up there and sang beautifully and angelically, like I could feel my soul being lifted up. And other places, that's not always the case. So I think we do music, and like I said before, the pioneering program we have the seventh day at the 6th, where we're going and meeting people at the Calabasas Farmers Market and interacting with them. I think a lot of people are solely focused on the sanctuary, and while we realize that's important, I think we're also ready to meet people where they're at. I would like to, I think I spoke about this yesterday, but I'll repeat it. I would like to grab more of the low-hanging fruit for people who are already in services. I think the stuff like Java and Jeans, the Shabbat programming we have for the kids, I think that's great. I think we need to take a couple more steps and push that envelope a little further. I think people really are reacting to it in a wonderful way. I think we just need to keep asking the question, how are we innovative? How are we reaching Jews? And people love Temple Aliyah. Somebody said it here in the sanctuary. I think it was you, Sarah, said that you really love Temple Aliyah because there's so many different programs that everybody can find something that they love. I think we just need to keep stirring the pot, and the moment we stop asking those questions is the moment that we're going to continue to grow and be loved. So I want us to grow and be loved.
I like the first half of your answer.
Okay.
But maybe it's because of Rabbi Vogel sitting next to me. But I'm really curious. They're good answers, but I think no, yeah. Just go to the other side of the pew. Yeah, that's way better. It's not me, it's him. I don't care. But it's not so. I'm curious not so much about what programming you want to add, which are great. Everything you've said, I think, is wonderful. But just more on a whether it's kind of custom or whether it's energy. Are there things that you've seen at other synagogues, whether it's just the way people are greeted, or whether it's the relationship with clergy, or some other kind of minhag that you know? Is there something that you do you really think that we could, not so much we would add, that other people have done really well and we could do better at?
Are you talking about services specifically or Bichlal?
Bichlal.
One thing that I've noticed about our youth programming with regard to the youth department is that we have incredible programming. We have an incredible youth director, and we have a great group of kids. What I would really like to see tweaked, elsewhere I've seen that other synagogues have a better space to work with. I would like to find a way, and I hope I haven't signed my death notice by saying this, I would like to find a way to get those kids a larger space, a space they can enjoy, a space they can thrive in. And that's going to take talking, and it's going to take support, but I think that we can take our youth department here and make it even better. It might not be difficult, it might not happen right away, but I've spoken to Avi about it, and I think it needs to happen. And furthermore, I'll say it again, with regard to any programming, what the clergy does and what everybody does here is wonderful, but I think the first conversation that has to happen is what does the congregation want? That should always be the first question. It's the question that I always want to start with. Does that answer your question better, Anthony? Thank you.
This is a very active area right here.
Yes, yeah, well, it's hard to shut us up. You've talked a lot about youth, and that's really important, really important. But let's talk just for a moment about the more mature people that are here. There are a few of us here, and also about the traditionalists that are at the temple. And what would you bring to your rabbinate here to reach that community and also to support that community and what they enjoy at this moment?
I think it's important to recognize that tradition has its place within Judaism. I think tradition is wonderful. Rabbi Vogel, I've mentioned this before, he's always taught me that anytime you want to make a decision about your rabbinate or about your practice in general, that it needs to have one foot in Torah. And, I haven't had a lot of interaction with what you're calling the older community. I haven't had a lot of interaction with them. Okay, fair enough. Thank you. I haven't had a lot of interaction with the more mature community. And, as a rabbinic intern, I think the internship was kind of designed to give me more access to kids. That's when I've had the most experience. I've been able to teach a Talmud class here and interact with the more mature community in that way. But I have to be honest, I don't really know what's making them tick right now. And I really want to know. I want to ask those questions, and I want to figure out what they need. So I'd be willing to have that conversation, but I think whatever we end up doing needs to have a place in Torah, and that's what the people seeking tradition here want. But I also want I want to cater to both of those communities. A lot of other institutions, this might answer Andy's question, has tried to do a thing where they just put a huge wedge between the congregation. This is the younger crowd, let's put them in the chapel. Let's put the more mature crowd in the sanctuary. Let them both do different things. And I don't think that's community. I want to see both people enjoying each other's company. I want to see everybody enjoying what the other side has to bring. So, Adrian, I have to be honest, I don't really know a great answer to that question, but I want to learn more, and I want to talk more and figure out what they want.
Following up on what you just said, what are your thoughts about our synagogue now having the majority of bar and bat mitzvahs at an afternoon service where the congregation is not included? Do you think we should be driving the B'nai Mitzvah back into the primary morning service where they would be with the community? Or if that's what the people want, keep them in their private afternoon service or semi-private, mostly private?
Honestly, if I had a magic wand, they would be with us here in the morning. I think that community is important. I just hope that the families who are choosing to have that bar and bat mitzvah service in the afternoon, I hope that they know that community is important. Maybe we can do a better job instilling that value in them, that our community is important and that we love them and that we care about them. And really, I think it's about reaching those kids earlier on. I do a 7th grade program for pre-bar and bat mitzvah prep, and I'm not even meeting all of those kids. I'm not pointing the finger at anyone. I just want to be able to meet them. I've heard other rabbinic colleagues say that the thing that they enjoy least about their rabbinate is teaching the 7th grade class, and I think that's a huge error, because I want those kids to know who their rabbi is, because their Jewish journey doesn't end after their bar bat mitzvah. It just begins. The program that we've pioneered here at Temple Aliyah, the Underground LA program, is great, and I think it's doing a good job of retaining. And I think we need to tweak it and figure out how to make it better. So if you don't know what the Underground LA program is, I'll just give you a brief recollection, just because not everybody was here yesterday. It's a program that takes in-class learning and then takes it out into the community, a field trip component. So I think more there just needs to be a better scaffolding up to the bar and bat mitzvah, and then a better way of retaining them. And hopefully we can instill that, that community is important, and they'll be more inclined to do the morning bar and bat mitzvah. I don't have a magic wand, so I can't promise you that when and if I come here that'll cease immediately, but I would really like for us to be together.
Next question.
Okay. Rabbi Gary Oren, when he was here with us, used to say that he has a rabbi, who is Brad Artson, and a Rebbe, Mimi Feigelson. And we've always had, with Rabbi Vogel and whoever the other rabbi is, it's worked really well when we've had sort of a balance between the intellectual approach and a more, I hate to say spiritual, that implies the intellectual isn't, but I think you know what I mean. So my question to you is, if you looked at your own personal outlook, are you more of a rabbi or are you more of a Rebbe?
Wow. Thank you very much. I think that titles are important. I never want to be the rabbi that you feel you have to go and kiss my ring. I want to be, and I think a lot of whom I learned that from is from one of my Rebbe, Oren, who's my teacher who I spoke on the phone with last week about how to navigate the interview process. I think a way of putting rabbis on a pedestal and not acknowledging that they're human beings. I want to be for the people. I will be the first to admit, a lot of my classmates, they say that my biggest flaw is that I'm too emotionally honest. But I think that's one of the things that makes me accessible. If I don't know the answer to something, I'll tell you I don't know the answer. I'll figure out a way for us to look it up together afterwards, but I just want to be somebody who encourages people to find the right path. So I'll get the title of rabbi on May 20th, and that'll mean a lot to me, but at the end of the day, I really want to know what it means to God, right? Because I can have a million different things after my name, but at the end of my life, if I look back and I have a title and I was a horrible person or I could have done X, Y, and Z much better, that means nothing. So I'm a human being first, I'm a rabbi second, but most importantly, I just want to help people find what makes them connect.
No, good answer. No, but just to follow up, obviously, you're very comfortable with Bible, with Talmud, with traditional learning. Are you equally comfortable, or more comfortable, or less comfortable with other approaches, the Neshama Minyan, the healing service, the different other kinds of things that we and some other synagogues do? Do you have a personal practice, a meditative practice, anything like that?
So I'll answer that with two responses. I haven't had a lot of access to those minyanim that you're speaking about. Secondly, the meditation isn't something that speaks to me. I understand my wife is really into it, and other classmates are into it. It's just not something that I've experimented with enough. I think the way that really connects me is I'm a big fan of tefillah, but I'm also a big fan of prayer. I think there can be a big difference. One of the term papers I wrote earlier on in my rabbinic career, I had to write my theory of prayer. I wrote up this big honkin' term paper, and I got it back, and a a rabbi who I really love and respect and I have a great relationship with circled one part and just wrote no. Big red pen. And I looked and I was like, what did he write that said no? And I said, some of the most devout prayers I've ever made have been in the morning while I'm brushing my teeth thinking about my day. And this rabbi wrote no, and I asked him why he wrote no, and he said, well, Jonathan, we don't say prayers in the bathroom. So I think that at the end of the day, we really have to do what speaks to our heart because that's what drives people. So I would love to experiment more with, and I should never stop experimenting or being comfortable with what I think is right because I think there's always an opportunity for a yes and. So I'd love to explore that more.
Other questions? All right, I have a really easy one for you. Where do you see the journey, the future of conservative Judaism the next 10 years, let's say? Or just, where do you see it going?
Oh, you said this was an easy question.
It's so easy, right?
I think that conservative Judaism could be in a lot of trouble if it doesn't start asking the right questions. And there are many institutions that are so eager to stop people at the door before they even get in. Of course, not here. That's why I love it here. There's a lot of places that are just so easy and willing to stop people at the door because they don't think X, Y, and Z. With regard to families, who even we say is a Jew, who can participate in this and that, I think that there's a lot more room for open dialogue about how that can occur and how we can bring more people in. I think conservative Judaism is a big tent and we should be more welcoming. And I believe that that is on its way toward progressing further. And any decision that we make needs to have, like I said, a foot in Torah and a foot in what we believe is right. So what I want to do is start asking the questions, and I want to bring people in. So conservative Judaism, it took me, and I wrote a sermon in my homiletics class, that it took me a couple years to really believe in conservative Judaism. And I think I didn't really even know what it meant to be a conservative Jew until I started interacting with Orthodox and Reform colleagues. And I found my place, and I believe in this, and I don't necessarily believe in that. The conservative movement has made big strides with regard to egalitarian minyanim, with regard to LGBTQ issues. I think that's great, and I think that my generation, the millennials, are going to want that and a lot more. And we have to figure out a way to cater to them. I don't know if I've said this before. Things we're not even thinking about, low-hanging fruit, as it were. I was reading an article about how millennials don't like mayonnaise. They're turned off by mayonnaise. I might have mentioned this before. And just about every kiddush luncheon I've ever gone to at a conservative synagogue is egg salad and tuna salad. I love it, by the way. Great. Is there a way that we can throw in macaroni and cheese once a month, or something else? Something that when we have a big crowd of millennials that are here, is there something that we can do to be more accommodating? I know that there's always a hesitancy to want to change things, but I think the conservative movement, I believe that it's true. I think that it just needs to be more open to conversation, and I think the people whom I love and respect that are trying to initiate that conversation more often than not are getting shut down. I don't want to see that happen. I want to continue to see that conversation thrive.
So this is a synagogue that has a recent and I would say, very proud past of having a Jew by choice as a rabbi. So how do you think your story and your past and your journey, not only to being a rabbi, but to Judaism, will make you a better rabbi? And what does that bring? What does that allow you to bring to a place like Temple Aliyah that those born into Judaism don't? And where does it hinder you? What disadvantages, perhaps, do you see for it?
So I'll begin by saying that there are several approaches to how you talk about yourself as being a Jew by choice. The person who you're referring to might have a different approach than I do. Some people are really about, like, I'm a rabbi first and a convert second, and that's just not how I view things. Like, the person I am is Jonathan Hodson, Rabbi Jonathan Hodson. That's me, and I want to be true to myself. But and I'll also say that yesterday, like with the way I spoke about my conversion, somebody came up to me after we had that big dialogue and told me how much it meant to them that I was upfront and forward about it, and they were likewise a Jew by choice and were intimidated by letting people know that. I think that people have to know. Oftentimes, people will find out that I'm a Jew by choice about 3 feet away from me getting a bagel and some tuna fish on Shabbat and say, well, tell me your story in 30 seconds before we get to... and so sometimes that can be challenging, but also the reason that I wanted to become a rabbi is because I feel like that my story can inspire not only Jews by choice, but people who are born Jewish and need to be inspired. I've spoken a lot at the Miller Introduction to Judaism program, many Shabbatot where I've told my story, and likewise, people have come up to me afterwards and said that that meant something. So I'm always willing to tell my story, not 5 feet away from tuna salad, but I'm always willing to tell my story, and I'm also, I think, I understand that huge trepidation with being an outsider and not knowing something and not wanting to offend. There's so many people that when they walk into a sanctuary, if they don't know X, Y, or Z, their immediate reaction is just to be quiet and reserved, because if they do say something, they don't want to offend anybody. And so you have an individual who's just sitting there terrified that they can get called up for an aliyah and they'll have to say these like intimidating words and might not be familiar with. So I've been there. I understand that. I also recognize that people just need to be loved. When I spoke to Rabbi Oren a couple days ago, he said, the thing I love about Temple Aliyah is people just want to love and be loved there. And I think that's something that I take to heart. And being a Jew by choice, I think it makes me recognize that people just want to be loved. They want to be brought into the fold. They want to be encouraged. And when you encourage them and when you love them, they can do incredible things. There's people here that are Jews by choice that do incredible things. I'm always just so encouraged when I see them doing things. And I think that, like I said before, that speaks to a merit of this community, that we can empower people to do that. So I hope I answered your question. I said several things there.
As a fellow convert, I appreciate that answer. Any other questions? So I have a little bit of a follow-up that Andy's question sparked in me. Temple Aliyah tries to be welcoming to interfaith families. So I would like to hear your thoughts about, are we doing a good job welcoming interfaith families? Is there more that we can do? And what's your personal philosophy on the conservative movement and how to help and how to connect with interfaith families and marriages?
Thank you. So my mentor and teacher, Rabbi Vogel, is. I feel like more people should know the incredible strides he's made with regard to that, and the way he's taught me. I don't want to embarrass him because he's incredibly humble and I love him, but I'll say that he's taking, with regard to my colleagues, he's very, very innovative in the way he thinks, and unfortunately, not everybody thinks the way he does. So I'll say that maybe more so behind the scenes, there's a lot going on with the RA and our movement and the leadership here than we may know. So I'll put that out there. With regard to interfaith, I'm surprised I haven't been asked that. I was kind of wondering if anybody would bring it up. And I'll say yet again, anytime I make a decision about my rabbinate or personal practice, I always try to have a foot in Torah. And I've noticed that anytime the Torah speaks about intermarriage, when God talks to the Israelite people says don't intermarry, there's always a clause after that that says because those people will lead you away from me. And in my experience as a Jew, in my experience as an almost rabbi, and my experience as a human being, the people that are marrying Jews, I've yet to meet one that is trying to lure a Jew away from Judaism. I suppose it happens. I suppose it exists. But the people that I meet who are actively marrying a Jewish person love that Jewish person because they're a Jew, and more often than not, they're interested in marrying them and raising a Jewish family, instilling Jewish values in their home, and supporting their kids during the bar and bat mitzvah process. That's been my experience. Other people might have had other experiences. Oftentimes, the people who are not Jews that are marrying Jews are hesitant to convert for a whole plethora of reasons that, unless you've ever had to make that decision, you might not understand how hard it is to make that decision. Sitting down with your family and saying, I want to be involved with the people, I want to change religions. That is a conversation that a lot of people find really, really hard to have. But I will say that oftentimes people who are towing the Jewish party line, are raising Jewish kids, are active in synagogue life, sometimes years and years later, they're finally ready to make that step. God forbid we ever do anything to them prior to making that step that would hinder them from wanting to make that step. I think we are very encouraging and we are very including, and I think not just us, but our entire movement needs to be a little more and see what can we do and have that conversation. Like technically on the books, rabbis are not allowed to attend interfaith weddings. Technically, we could get in a lot of hot water for simply attending an interfaith wedding. Furthermore, speaking or doing anything at an interfaith wedding, we could get in trouble. And as I mentioned before, I think that is changing and evolving because wonderful people in the community who are not Jewish are wanting to be supportive of Jewish families. And as we get to know them and love them, I think the conversation is moving forward. But I want to see it move forward, and I think it will move forward substantially in my lifetime. It's just, what are we willing to talk about?
I have a follow-up.
You're asking all the easy questions.
I know. So there's a teenager that you've had a really great relationship with, and now they're maybe in their mid-20s wanting to get married to someone not Jewish. They want you to, A, perform the ceremony, or if you can't be, attend. What do you tell them?
First of all, I would say Mazel Tov, because I think that anytime anybody finds love, that is something that I'm hesitant to disregard. I believe that love is a powerful thing. I'd say Mazel Tov, and then I would tell them that currently the rabbinical assembly won't allow me to officiate that marriage. I would acknowledge that there is a lot of pain associated with that, a lot of pain. When being told no from somebody that you love and trust, who's your rabbi and teacher, and I've spoken to colleagues who have been out in the field a long time who have several times done a baby naming or officiated a Brit Milah, have been with this individual at their bar and bat mitzvah, have talked to them while they're in college, and now suddenly they have to have the heartbreaking conversation and tell them that they can't officiate their marriage. That's pain that has to be acknowledged. And that is pain that the conservative movement is trying to facilitate a better conversation, because a lot of people, that pain deals such a big blow that they leave the congregation and want nothing to do with the institution and the rabbi. And that's deep. So I think I would acknowledge that pain, and then I would find a way to be a part of that simcha in any way that I can. In any way that I can. And if that means facing a degree of backlash, then I'm willing to have that conversation. But like I said, at the end of the day, I am who I am, and I know what I believe in, and I want people to feel accepted, and I want people to feel all the love that Judaism has to offer, not just all the wedges that it can create.
Any other easy questions for Rabbi Hodson?
There are a number of traditions that are disappearing in the conservative movement. This morning, we saw the bar mitzvah boy put on tefillin. but his father and grandfather didn't know how to, didn't want to. We've had many bereavements in our community over the last years, and there's no Shiva minyan. Do you think it's okay that that happens? Do you want to encourage it, that we will retain those traditions? What would you do for those and others types of activities within Judaism? Do you think it's necessary?
I would never want to stop encouraging Jewish practice for people that it brings merit and meaning to. There are some traditions that are important, and see, what religion is supposed to do, and I'm not even a big fan of religion, but what it's supposed to do is serve as a vehicle for the individual and God, and more often than not with community as well. Some people find various mitzvot incredibly challenging and incredibly hurtful at times. For instance, the way ritual divorce is conducted can be incredibly challenging and can be incredibly painful. Would I encourage that? I think I would have to have a conversation with the individual and see if it's bringing them relevance and meaning in their life. I think that's what Judaism is supposed to do. It is supposed to bring us closer to God. I oftentimes, because I'm emotionally honest, I will say that if I make a mistake, the first thing I do is say amen because God's perfect and I'm not. Right? So there will be times where people are going to say a bracha over this before they do that, or there's so many things that we can get wrong. For me, it's not about what are we doing right or what are we doing wrong. It's what is relevant to us, and is that relevancy connecting us to the greater picture? That needs to be the broader picture first. As people learn and grow, I think we can look at the minutia of everything. But I would always want to encourage if that encouragement leads toward a path of relevancy and wholeness and love for God, Torah, and Israel.
I'm going to go on this side, and I'll come back.
Good morning. Could you tell us what your favorite prayer is of all the prayers and why?
Wow. This might seem like a cop-out, but I really believe in the Shema. That declaration of God's eternal oneness is something that, as somebody who did not grow up Jewish, I wasn't presented with an idea that God is in fact one. I was presented with an alternative that God is in fact three. And one of the things that brought me to this faith is looking at the religion that I grew up with and looking at the source texts it was based off of and finding the contradictions in it. So when I read that line, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, like that really spoke to me. My son, we read this every night before bed together, and I always I have him translate the line afterwards. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And when he goes to school, he goes to a Jewish day school, and the whole community recites that. The entire time he repeats that English line. And his teacher told me that one of the rabbis told him that he shouldn't say that. He's 3.5 and got real chutzpahdik and was like, no, this is a part of the prayer. God is one. So I think when I recite that line, it brings me, I really try and envision Sinai with Moshe coming down with the tablets and our entire people reciting that, acknowledging that. So that's what speaks to my heart. And every time I pray it, I can't think of a time where I've ever prayed it and not felt something.
So I know you work with youth, and I don't know how easy of a question this is, but we want to, in the process of wanting to expose our youth to different narratives of how people live, and that will include their religion and many other things. Do you think it's a problem that when we do that? I mean, we have problems sometimes with interfaith choirs because some of our youth might have a romantic attachment to someone who's not Jewish. I grew up in a very Jewish neighborhood and really was not exposed to things before other religions and stuff. So what is it that we can do to instill in our children, in our youth, a real compassion and a real loyalty to Judaism, and still give them the experience of experiencing the world through other eyes?
I think the answer to that question can be found in Torah, because the mitzvah the most in the Torah is welcoming the stranger. And by the way, it's not just in Torah. Our sages throughout the rabbinic era have talked about why it's important to interact with other people who are not just Jewish. I think there should be. It is problematic just to present one narrative and never let kids have access to the rest of the entire world. And because if you do that, you're setting yourself up for failure. I can't even do that with my 3.5-year-old because we drive around the city and he sees enormous billboards for the Grinch. Right? He's aware that there are people in the world other than Jews, and I think he needs to have access to that, and he needs to learn from those people and interact with those people. And I think there still can be room for having the conversation of this is what we do and that's what they do. And they find meaning and relevance in that, and we find meaning and relevance in this. This is what we do. And I think programs like USY and Camp Ramah are good for instilling Jewish identity. And I believe in those activities. I think they're good. And I think at the same time, kids have to live in the real world. That's something also I love about the conservative movement, is that we live in the real world. We're not in a shtetl somewhere. We're not only eating particular plate. Like, we are out in the real world. We're interacting with everybody. And at the same time, we maintain our tradition because it's ours, and we realize it's important. This is what we do. And what other people do is what they do. I'm really, every time I see you posting about interfaith dialogue on Facebook, I'm encouraged, and I think that is necessary and important in the 21st century. So, yes.
We have just a couple minutes left. I know Adrian and Andy maybe had a...
I was just curious. You mentioned that you don't like religion. Why don't you like religion? And what is it that you don't like?
Unfortunately, whether I like to admit it sometimes or not, I think I bear the yoke of the term millennial. And we were brought up in a day and age in which kind of slightly before the cusp of things started to happen, and we realized that religions with the capital R can be used to intimidate and hurt people. And historically, religion has caused lots of undue harm. I believe in peoplehood, and I believe in God, and I believe in mitzvot, and I believe in Torah. And to a certain degree, sometimes I'll have to admit that I believe in religion. But all of those things before that religion with a capital R are paramount to me. And I never want to, I speak with a lot of kids at Camp Ramah and USY, and they say, oh, I don't do this, oh, I can do this because I'm Reform. I can do this because I'm Orthodox. I don't do this because I'm conservative. Like, all of these things, I think that that should never be, your religion, quote unquote, should never be a cop-out. Now, what is your faith? What speaks to your heart? What speaks to you? What you do with your life, what you believe in personally, that should define who you are and the decisions you make, not your religion. So I hope I answered that question.
So we have about 1, maybe 2 minutes left. Is there any other last. Okay, so thank you so much, Rabbi Hodson. Do you have any quick parting thoughts?
I just want to acknowledge that it is really meaningful to me that you took time out of your day to come here and talk to me. And the work that this synagogue does is so important to me, and like I've said it a million times, but just the amount of support I've received here, not just this weekend, not just weeks leading up to this weekend, but like literally since day one. I was brought in, and I was shown love, and I was shown encouragement, and that's so incredible. It's so incredible. And I might have mentioned it earlier. Really, the reason I want to be here is I want to take all of that love and all that encouragement that I receive, and I just want to give it back. That's what I think is important, and that's what I think the clergy does and does so well, and I think that's what all of you do. And from the bottom of my heart, I just want to say thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for spending the weekend with us.
And the thing about it is you can't prepare for it. And they say like, oh, don't be somebody that you're not. Well, you can't be when you have to be yourself. You just have to. So, thank you. Who thought it was a good idea to throw an infant into the interview process? Like, we don't have enough going on. Let's, and then the 3-year-old got sick this weekend. Boy, howdy.